Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson,
My
Right.
thoughts, your thoughts.
Alan Seiler,
Mama's gonna be eating good tonight.
and Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody.
Woohoo! Got the
Yeah.
band back together.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, before we get started, Keith, do we have any This Week in Trek this week?
Dude, had a couple of things. It was a kind of a busy month. Let me find it here. One of these days I'll remember this stuff. Just a couple of very obvious ones. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. There was a lot of premieres. Remember back in the days when we had a real television season and everything premiered and actually in September?
Right, yeah.
You had an actual premiere month and sweeps weeks and all that weird stuff. So this kind of hails back to that. Obviously, the 24th of September, 1990, arguably the most anticipated episode in the franchise of Star Trek was The Best of Both Worlds, episode 2, or
Right,
the
yeah.
conclusion from the final season, where we had waited an entire summer to see if Jean-Luc Picard was going to die. When Commander Riker issued the famous Mr. Worf fire to some of the best music of that series. Amazing stuff. And let me ask you guys who saw it, was the wait worth it?
Oh, I don't remember watching it live.
Oh yeah.
I definitely did not.
You didn't, Veronica? Shoot. Yeah, it was good. Alan, I think you thought the wait was worth it, eh?
Oh my God. It was crazy.
Yeah. Those of a certain age, for some, this will mean nothing. The only other thing that rivaled this was the famous Who Shot JR on Dallas. And that was a thing back in the day. And if you don't remember what Dallas was, never mind.
Oh, everybody knows what Dallas is, even if they've not seen it.
I hope so. Also, still sticking in September, 27 years later, 24th of September, 2017, The Vulcan Hello premieres. And thus we have the newest era of Star Trek. That was the premiere, of course, of Discovery with The Vulcan Hello and the battle at the binary stars.
Yeah.
Which introduced us to a whole new crew, a whole new ship, a whole new everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember they aired it on CBS for the premiere, and so I was waiting to watch it, and it was pushed late because of a football game, and I was like, just like I remember.
Right.
Right, and then of course that's ushered in the whole new Trek world that we all are enjoying right now. So quite. I was not there for the original series. I'm just a little too young for that one, but I was there for the kickoff of the TNG era. I was definitely live there for the kickoff of Enterprise, which was a little bit of an experiment, and I was there, of course, for Discovery and so forth. So it's been an interesting time. And and believe it or not, I saw the Abrams first movie the day it premiered as well. And I've supported every one of those movies.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, this one real quick, 26 September 1966. This is from Matt Sweatman. The story outline for one of the best episodes in Star Trek history was submitted. A Taste of Armageddon.
Hey.
That's right.
I know Alan agrees with me there.
That's right, baby.
And let's see. In 2001, still in September, the 26th of September, it's been a long road getting from there to here. Of course, the television premiere of Enterprise, Broken Bow.
Wow.
Which starred Captain Archer and a whole new crew with the first Warp 5 vessel, a series that Alan and I really love, and everyone else on the podcast, maybe not so much.
Oh well, what you gonna do?
Yeah. Not everyone likes everything.
Yeah. One thing about Enterprise I find interesting, it had huge, like they all do, had huge numbers. And then of course, it fell off over the years. And then, of course, instead of going what everybody thought was going to be the standard 7 years at the time, it only got 4 seasons,
right?
Which is kind of sad. And now it's actually gained in popularity. Its popularity among the old Star Trek shows has actually gone up. I don't know if there will ever be anything approaching another series or anything like that, but definitely worth a revisit, I think. More premieres, 28th of September, 1987, Encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah, that's a big
right.
one.
Today is Next Generation Day, baby.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? And I remember again, I was living here in Atlanta at the time, and the TV I had blown out. So I actually went to one of those rental places, the ones that charge you like 200% over the cost of the rental, and
Right.
rented a television. And 1 hour before the show premiered, these two big burly delivery guys delivered a television that looked like it had been on a Flophouse motel that had cigarette burns in it and
Oh no.
stains on it I don't want to think about, but
Oh, gross.
I watched TNG on that little television.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
if they had shown up at your house after the show was over, you could have been like, never mind, just take it back.
Exactly. Yeah, I could have just gotten rid of it. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, because this is, to me, this is kind of significant because it's one of the best character examinations I think Star Trek has ever done. And this is way back in 1966 on the 29th of September was the premiere of the original series episode, The Naked Time,
Okay.
which is
Nice.
one of the best episodes I've ever seen where people's characteristics are explored and it doesn't feel forced and artificial. Really excellent show.
Wow.
I see you've shifted your pronunciation over the last couple of
I
years
think we
you've
made
been
him
with us.
self-conscious. Don't let us
I can
bully you,
say-
Keith. Say it the way you want.
Right on.
The Naked Time.
There you go.
Exactly.
That's this week in Trek history.
Well, if I could throw one in, I believe that
Uh-huh.
today is William Wyndham's 100th birthday. I
Oh,
read that
wow.
earlier today, and so I
Okay.
think that's worth noting too, because William Wyndham was a legend on Star
Absolutely.
Trek and so many other things.
Hmm.
Murder, She Wrote.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
other great things.
All right,
Twilight
Alan.
Zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Alan, do we have any this week, or do we have any news this week?
We have some news this week.
Awesome.
Our first story is kind of a broad story, and a deal has been reached with the Writers Guild of America, which it describes as, quote, exceptional with meaningful gains and protections for writers in every sector of the membership. The
Wow.
Writers Guild board has approved the tentative new deal and lifted the strike as of midnight Tuesday night. Writers can return to work pending full authorization of the new contract by the membership. The union was successful in getting agreement on all their major issues, along with some compromise with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. The Actors Union is reported to be set to begin new negotiations with the AMPTP within days. So
Wow.
Good.
that means, of course, that every television show can resume, progress on where they left off. And that includes Star Trek, of course.
Yeah.
In a related story, screenwriter Lindsay Beer confirms that J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 4, not the one with the whales, but the one with Chris Pine, is still in the works. She confirms that at least part of the delay was that she had to, quote, hop off to direct the new Pet Sematary prequel, Bloodlines.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Okay.
that's something.
Yeah, but I mean that's one of like 5 movies we've heard about over the last few years. So
Well,
we'll
exactly.
see. There's been several different projects that they've very excitedly announced, and then like, oh, never mind.
Exactly.
So we'll see what happens.
So, at least according to the co-scriptwriter, it's still happening.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Story number 2. This is a quick one. Paramount Plus is launching in Japan in December with a full slate of content, including Strange New Worlds being available on launch day. No other Trek movie or series was specifically named as being available at launch, but unless they're going to plan on doing like a tiered release of their newer shows, you can at least probably expect that the legacy Trek shows will be available.
Hope so.
So they're expanding their territory, their global dominion. And then
Dominion's
the
right word.
final story is that every year libraries and the book industry celebrate Banned Book Week. And that puts focus on books that have been challenged both now and over the years. Usually this thing occurs in September. This year Banned Book Week is October 1st through 7th, so that's kind of a little bit of a shift. And the honorary chair this year has been named, it's Mr. LeVar Burton.
Oh,
Awesome.
nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
LeVar is going to be headlining a live virtual conversation with Banned Books Week the youth honorary chair, Datavian Daniels, about censorship and advocacy. And that takes place October 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay.
The event will
Awesome.
be streamed live on Instagram. And this is kind of significant because normally it's an author or somebody related that is named the honorary chair of the event. And this year, this is the first time an actor has ever been named. And, you know, with his history with reading Rainbow
Mhm.
and as much of an advocate as he has been for education and reading,
Mhm.
who else could it be? You know,
Right. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
a
so
perfect choice.
congratulations, Mr. Burton.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Alan, over the last few weeks, we've missed you.
Oh, thank you. I've missed
and
you guys too.
You've been missing our discussions of very short treks. So I was wondering if you wanted to. I think people are missing your positive voice in our conversations. So
Ooh,
you want to give your opinions of very short treks up to this point?
they suck. How's that for positive? No,
That's very positive.
the first ones were atrocious.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were like a hate crime against Trekkies.
Yes.
I mean, just awful. I will say
Yes.
now that this week's I enjoyed a little bit more than the other ones. It started out good.
Okay.
I mean, I thought it was really clever that they started with Trip and the Enterprise crew. And then, you know, because this happened in the live action shows, you got Troy, Indiana pausing their holodeck playback. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. And then somebody else comes along and that's a hologram or holodeck playback. And then the next one gets paused and you get Neelix and you get all these other people and Saru and all. And it's like this chain reaction of stuff. And I thought, well,
Yeah.
that's kind of fun. But then it ended up being stupid.
Yes.
It just, I mean, I was kind
That
of with it and I
ending.
was like, this is fun. I'm kind of enjoying this. And then the last scene was just the dumbest.
Yeah. Like I was with it at first, and I thought. I mean, I would go as far as say this one was cute.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't say it was funny. I don't think I
No,
laughed.
No, but it was cute.
It was
cute, clever.
Seeing the trail. They kind of lost me when the timeline shifted and they went
Yes.
from Discovery back. Because why would Sulu be watching Discovery in his holodeck? You know,
Right.
right. And then
But
it became
go
kind of
ahead.
random. No, go ahead.
The other weird thing is that it included scenes from Prodigy,
Prodigy.
Yes.
the show that they have done away
Yes.
with. What
Now-
in the
Yeah.
heck?
Well, I believe this one was written by Aaron Watke, who is an executive producer of Prodigy. So maybe he just worked to get that in there. But I mean, I was
It's
thrilled
crazy.
to hear Zero's voice and
Yeah.
to see
Yes.
the Prodigy crew standing there. I thought that was great.
Me too. I loved it.
And I kind of like the little as an idea, the gag at the end of the computer saying "in program" and being like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then cut to black. I think that's fine.
It had
It
it
was
was
the-
closer to being good than the
Yeah.
other
It was
previous
the
ones.
amalgamation of all the people smushed together that I was
Exactly.
like,
Yeah, what was going on there?
where?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
dumb.
No, what?
That made no sense.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I also think it actually looked better visually than the
Mm.
other ones. You know,
Okay.
their attempt to recreate the cruder animation of the animated series. For
Right.
some reason, it looked better. And I will say the very first shot of the Enterprise NX-01 from the front
Mhm.
was pretty. That was a really nice
Yeah.
shot. And I
Yeah,
think
that
we're
was
all
good.
agreed. I laughed a couple of times with that last thing, like you said, Veronica, that weird amalgamated blob. I don't even get what that was about. It reminds me of Saturday Night Live at its worst, when you would sometimes they have these great jokes and it was like, okay, that joke just went on a little too long. You could have cut it.
Well,
but
that-
it was decent.
I'm sorry. That's kind of what Very Short Treks has done every episode up
Yes.
to this point.
Yeah.
It's just you have a gag and then you just keep
Mhm.
that one gag
Yeah.
until
Right.
you're out of time and then it's just over.
Right.
So a couple of comments. A Facebook user says that they did like this week's Very Short Trek, which is great.
Yay.
And Matt Sweatman says it's sad that Very Short Treks is the only Trek acknowledgement of Prodigy anymore.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ugh.
Yeah, that was ironic.
Yeah. And I see Wayne's in our comments too, and he
Yes.
mentioned that he's seen the premiere of every Star Trek.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so sorry. I didn't even catch that. Yeah. The premiere of that's amazing.
Yeah,
Wait,
absolutely.
including the original series? Dude, that's
He
That's
says
a feat.
everyone. That's
Awesome.
crazy, dude.
Absolutely.
So, Alan, I want to know what you thought of Riker's reaction from last week's Very Short Trek.
Are you talking about the worst contact?
Yes.
The
What
gross
did you
out.
think about Riker's reaction?
I don't remember it because I hated it so much. Like literally actively hated it.
Right.
Yeah, that was the gross out one where their bodily
so
fluids
stupid.
were rare and precious and all that weird stuff.
God,
Yeah.
it was so bad.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, we've
It's
got one
so
more.
awful.
So I mean, they're progressing. They're getting closer to a good one. So maybe next week is the week.
If you say so.
Are we counting very short treks as a Star Trek series?
No.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
Well, because then, in my estimation, Enterprise wouldn't be the worst Star Trek series anymore, and that's worth noting. So I thought if it
Okay.
counts,
Then in that case, yes, we do count
then
it.
Enterprise is bumped up a notch.
Yes, excellent. No longer last place. Ugh,
That's right.
I
My
love
last
it.
place would have been Picard if not for Picard season 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, this week we decided to have a little conversation about telepaths in Star Trek. And then after that, we'll be getting into our discussion of empathological fallacies, the latest episode of Lower Decks. But first, we wanted to talk about some legacy Trek and just Trek in general, and about the telepaths in Star Trek. So who wants to kick that off?
Alan, you're the one that's always so excited about telepaths.
Okay, well then let me set this up. This week's Lower Decks is all about 3 Betazoids visiting the ship and hijinks that ensue from that. So I'm going to start with Deanna because when I started watching Next Gen, Deanna was not the most liked character at her debut, and it didn't get any better in season 1. But I'm going to tell you that I have 2 kind of like fetishes. That's not a good word to use, but it's something that I'm really into. One of them is any character that has mental abilities. I'm absolutely fascinated by that. I'm fascinated
Special
by
interest.
what?
I don't know. Instead of fetish,
Instead
say
of
special
fetish,
interest.
I
Yeah.
get you. I get you. I'm fascinated by how they relate to other people, how they relate to themselves, how they deal with being able to see things in other people that others can't. The other thing that I really dig is any alien ability that has a natural hindrance. So like if Spock is half human, then he doesn't, he struggles with who he is and all that stuff. And so the fact that Deanna was from a telepathic race, but she's of mixed heritage, therefore her abilities are diluted and she has that natural barrier. I was fascinated by her from day one. She was like immediately going to be my favorite character on the show, even though, it was dubious how well she was written in that first episode. But so from there, I've just sort of been drawn to telepathic characters and races in Star Trek and how they differ from each other, how they relate to humans, how humans relate to them. So I'm really excited about this topic tonight.
What's you, Keith?
Yeah, and I think one thing to kind of add on to what Alan was saying, telepathy is one of those old science fiction tropes that goes back for literally generations. And indeed, back in the day of the BIMs, the bug-eyed monsters in movies, telepaths were often thought of as evil. And I think there's no coincidence that the first telepathic race introduced in Trek, the Telosians, look like the old school views of futuristic advanced aliens,
Right.
with the really tiny, frail bodies and the big heads,
Yeah.
which in this case had the pulsing arteries that you could see in there. So it's an absolute staple. And I'm like, Alan, I think telepathy is a really fascinating thing, such as what you wanted. When you ever talk to people who read comic books and stuff, when you play the game, what superpower would you like to have?
Yeah.
Telepathy is always up there, along with flight and super strength. It's the one superpower I would not like to have.
No.
In that I don't know if I really want to know people's feelings and thoughts all the time.
No. No.
I'm naturally very empathic. I can really tell how people feel even when I don't want to. I sure don't
Yes.
want to read their minds.
No.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's a tough power to have.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially like, I mean, I wouldn't want to hear everybody's thoughts about me. You know what I mean? Especially when you're younger and like, imagine going through high school and you could hear what everybody thinks about you.
Right.
That would be rough.
No.
Well, and to dovetail what Alan said about Deanna Troy, I really don't mean this in an improper manner, so I hope I don't offend anybody. But I
Oh, you
always
better not. I'm
wondered.
gonna jump to her honor.
Well, the thing is, Marina Sirtis is a beautiful woman, and for so many years on the show, they had her in really clinging outfits. So I always wonder when you're talking about Alan, like having empathic powers. The closest we got was Barkley. When Barkley was in Troy's quarters one time getting counsel, he obviously had attraction to her. So you wonder how do people function when they walk around knowing if someone's attracted to them? What if you have
Yeah.
thoughts that, let's be honest,
Yeah.
we all have? What do you do? I mean, and
Right.
what does Troy do all the time when she's counseling a lot of men and women who are probably thinking, my God, this is a hot counselor right here. I mean, do you learn to ignore that, I guess, when you're a telepath? Or to your point, Charles, is somebody sitting there going, hey, this guy is such a stupid blah, blah, blah. What do you do?
Look at that guy's shirt. Aw.
Well,
His
Keith,
shirt's
you know
red.
what? Keith, you bring up a good point about Deanna being a counselor, because if you
Mhm.
remember back to the episode The Loss, where those
yeah.
like flat dimension beings surrounded the ship and she kind of lost control of her abilities,
Mhm.
she had that one of the few times that they showed her actually doing her job, where she
Yeah.
had the counseling session with the lady, and she says, I have to be upfront with you before we start our session today. I have lost my empathic ability, so I'm not able to read your emotions. You know,
Mhm.
and the unstated part is, but I am a trained psychologist. I can still do my damn job.
Right.
Right.
And the lady tells her thing, and she's like, I just don't know how you could possibly have process, whatever. And the lady's like, no, you're totally wrong. I'm fine. I'm doing great. I'm hip and groovy. And Deanna goes through this moment of doubt of like, I cannot function without my empathy.
Mm.
And then come to the end of the episode, the lady's like, you know what, Deanna, you were absolutely right. I was not in a place where I could deal with the trauma that I've been through. So, I'm sorry, but you were right. And of course she was right, because she doesn't need empathy to do a psychologist's job. It helps her.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Right.
interesting that when you're going into a professional setting like that, she uses it in a way in her professional position on the ship. But what about when you're just like with people in the mess hall?
Absolutely.
How do you like actively not sense all the people around you? I mean, it's just a natural thing for you.
Yep.
So do you know who cheated on their entrance exam, or who is mad at somebody else, or who forgot their spouse's birthday, or whatever? I mean, there's all these things that every single thing is potentially exposed to that person. How do you relate to that person? How do you trust that person? How do you deal with them on a regular basis? Now, of course, Deanna was a nice person and had a moral center, but what if she didn't?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there was that Betazoid guy who came on the ship who was negotiating for the Barzan wormhole. I
Mhm.
think that was what the episode he was in. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I won't trust that guy. He's like having a
Right.
used car
Yeah.
salesman with telepathic abilities,
right.
But you know what? But at the same time, he made a really interesting point. Back to what you were saying, Alan, what you were saying, Charles. Deanna was basically telling him, I can't believe what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is dirty. And he's like, oh, so when you sit there and you advise the captain when a Romulan ship is facing you, and she goes, that's different. He goes, how's it different? We're still using my powers.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
makes an interesting point but would a telepath or an empath in his case be allowed in negotiations because of that point?
Oh, I think
Um,
so. Absolutely. What about interrogations?
Right.
That's where she should be. Screw the, I mean, that could be her side gig,
Right.
She could, be helping the crew, but when there comes to interrogation, buddy, she should be there.
Well, some races do have interrogating telepaths, like
That's
the
right.
Kazenti we saw from the animated series. They bring in
Mhm.
the Kazenti telepath to read minds. Also, interestingly about the Kazenti, and I read up on them, Kazenti telepaths are kind of sort of mutants, even though they exist, and they always end up looking like that. But there's something about the telepathic gene that makes all Kazenti telepaths weakly and frail and sick, and so
pink.
for them, it's not a good ability.
Yeah.
Interestingly.
Right.
like for Troy, you mentioned her, losing her empathic abilities and not being sure if she could do her job. I mean, for her, it's one of her senses, though. I think
Yes,
she,
exactly.
she just like someone who was blind or deaf could be a psychologist, but if someone just suddenly lost their sight or their hearing, then I think they'd be uncertain about everything, about functioning.
One of the smartest things they did in that episode was she's sitting in 10 forward and she's at a table and Will comes walking up behind her and startles her because she's not used to not knowing who's around her from all sides. She doesn't have to have vision to know that someone's walking up behind her because she can sense them. And I thought that was a really cool moment.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like what Troy does to avoid being overwhelmed with all the crew people, I feel like since it was something that she grew up with, it's something she had to learn to tune out.
Yeah.
And just keep it at a certain level, because I mean, you can do that. You can learn to tune out certain things. It takes a lot of focus, but I feel like that's probably how she functions.
But on Betazed, do they do that?
Probably
do they
not.
just go around open to each other at all points in time, or
I would think so.
Do they? I would think so too.
Yeah.
Or do they learn to partition? Do they keep things to themselves that other Betazoids
I feel like it would be
can't
part of the
read?
training at the very least, because they have to interact with the rest of the Federation and other creatures, and they can't necessarily always be knowing what the heck's going on. So I feel like that would have to be part of the training.
Well, the
It
one
has
we
to
saw,
be just like the Deltans had to curtail some of their natural abilities in order to function within our framework.
I mean, the Betazoid we saw the most, aside from Deanna, was Waxana Troy.
Yes.
And she didn't seem to be super disciplined about people's privacy.
No,
but she's not in Starfleet. So I think it would be a different thing for Starfleet. But that goes to my point of, do Betazoids just let it all hang out, so to speak? Do they just sense everything around them at all times?
Well, maybe. I mean, they famously get married naked.
True.
So maybe, I mean, once you've seen everything in someone's mind, getting naked isn't that big a deal anymore.
That's a point.
Yeah.
Also, I think one of the things about telepathy is if you read treatments of it in science fiction, comic books, cartoons, and Star Trek, I think the definition of telepathic reading it comes from two directions, and people sometimes get confused. Some portrayals of telepathy, even in Star Trek, almost indicates that the telepath literally sends a beam or something into your mind and reads your mind, like they offensively go into your head. And there's a lot of treatments where you'll say they read your mind. That's how people block them. But other treatments of it, again in Star Trek also, makes it seem like what Veronica's saying is we're all projecting telepathic, we're all projecting thoughts all the time, like a radio.
Yeah.
And so one version of telepathy is like the telepath is a radar where they send a signal out into your head and it comes back. And other interpretations of it are they're just a receiver. And to what you were saying, Veronica, in the episode by any not by any other name, what is the other one? The one with Miranda, the human telepath.
Is there in Truth No Beauty?
Oh yes.
Thank you. In the dinner they had, she mentioned that she studied on Vulcan not to increase her telepathic powers, but to learn how not to hear other people's thoughts. So what you're saying, Veronica.
Yeah.
Because she always senses, but she has to learn, just like, I mean, all of you guys are musicians and performers and stuff. You have to learn, like when you, Alan, when you playing music, you have to listen to the other musicians to gel with them, but you also can't let them get you off track. I understand.
Oh yeah.
And when you're in a crowded room, the same thing. Like we all go to lunch and we can read a book with 100 people around us, but we don't. We know the noise is there, but we don't listen to it. So I've always, when I look at
not everyone does that.
Thank you.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So there's so many times I look at a telepath, I'm thinking, well, that telepath seems to have a power where they're almost sending a beam into your head and it comes back. And then other times they just feel your thoughts, and the thoughts are always in the air. So that's always a part of how telepaths have been portrayed in science fiction.
Yeah. And you mentioned Dr. Miranda Jones, and that's an interesting point too, because I mean, we were talking about this off mic, but I mean, humans have Esper potential as well, which was, I mean, a big plot point in Where No Man Has Gone Before. And we've seen that a few times in Star Trek where a human something will happen to them and they advance in some way, and all of a sudden they have mental powers too. It's like humans are like right on the cusp of having those mental abilities as well. And Miranda Jones had it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Vulcan is another interesting example because they are sensitive in that way, but to actually probe, it takes a physical contact
Mm.
in most
Mhm.
cases. I mean,
Right.
because we have seen Spock do it without physical contact, like with that cloud thing,
Right.
and I think that's a really interesting difference in what we normally think of as telepaths.
Mm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we saw Spock reach out with his mind and
Yes. And control actions of somebody.
right, and then let the guard to open the thing and that
Yep.
sort of thing. And we saw Sarek, mentally talk with Michael Burnham from across the galaxy one time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
we
wrote
saw
that
that.
down. I wrote that down in my notes, Charles. The Luke Skywalker moment.
right.
He was using the Force to project himself.
But,
Yeah,
but I
Yeah.
mean,
that was way out of
Vulcan
line.
telepathy has always been based on the episode of how powerful it is. But
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. I mean, would you want to work with a coworker who was telepathic?
No.
Yeah, but
No,
exactly.
no.
But even just playing poker with them, I mean,
Yeah.
the Next Gen crew played poker all the damn time in uniform. Like, are they on duty while they're playing poker? So, but even if she's not actively reading, she knows, like, if you pick up a card, you will have a reaction to that card.
Right.
Whether it's, you're putting, I've just completed she might not read, I have just completed my straight, but she knows. She will know if you're bluffing. She knows when you've got a card you're waiting for. So how does she turn that off? And how do you not suspect if she wins a hand? That's because she,
Right.
sensed everything that was going on at the table,
Well,
I
is
don't
it?
think she can.
Yeah, I mean, is it that she's turning it off, or is
I don't know.
Riker like you can bluff with your face? Can you bluff with your mind?
Exactly.
Maybe Riker. I mean, Riker's playing cards with Geordi and Data and Deanna and winning.
Regularly.
Well, yeah. Right. That's true.
Yeah, and that goes back to how do you think telepathy works? Because if you're always
Mhm.
broadcasting and the telepath is literally just receiving like a radio station, they can't ever turn it off. But if they have to kind of almost enter your mind, then maybe you can kind of sort of. I've seen
Right.
treatments, people are trained to block telepathy by consciously thinking so much surface noise, like shouting in their minds, that the telepath can't sort through the thoughts.
Yeah. Well, that's
That
what
does
Captain
take a
Pike
lot of
did
training.
for the Telosians, is thinking those angry
Mhm.
thoughts to block them. So maybe
Right.
that's what Riker's doing during the card game. He's thinking about strangling people all the time.
Let me get 3 good comments here.
All right.
First of all, I want to say that our Facebook user from earlier is actually Elaine, and she
Yay.
says that Enterprise is definitely not the worst, even though she knows that she has not seen all of the treks. She's confident in saying Enterprise is not the bottom of the heap.
All right,
On
Elaine.
this discussion, Matt says it feels like they have to be careful when introducing a telepathic character, as it seems to be an imbalance of abilities and almost makes this character a superhero. Agreed. I felt that making Troy half Betazed and merely empathic was an attempt to avoid having her overpowered in relation to the other crew. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Plus, it
Yeah.
gives the writers a hook.
Yeah.
It gives them something to like explore, which they almost never did. But
No.
that's beside the point. Wayne says, if you can imagine the opposite of everything you have just discussed, that would be me every day with people who are not autistic. I lack some social skills you all take for granted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very interesting, Wayne. So you see the world some ways differently than some of us see the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Matt says, I prefer that when we are introduced to a telepathic race or character, there is some limiting factor, such as Vulcans having to perform a mind meld. I think it's just more interesting that way. I think it's more interesting to have that limitation, you know?
Well, Matt and Alan, that's very interesting you say that, because I've read treatments that say technically Vulcans are not true telepaths, because most of the
Right.
telepathy has to be, because telepath, of course, tele means far. And so technically they're not true telepaths or full telepaths, because most of their telepathic abilities are from touching. And I find it interesting because in the episode Spectre of the Gun, at the beginning of the episode, Spock mentioned when Kirk was like, "We're going down there because those are my orders." Remember, Spock said, as true telepaths, they could be quite formidable. And the Malkotians were really good. Remember, everybody heard their language in their heads. They obviously could project incredible illusions. And there were, to Matt's point, they were one of the most overpowered telepathic races we've seen, short of the Telosians. I mean, those dudes are fierce. And I've always wondered, one of the things we had talked about in our Facebook group with the host group is beings like the Melkotians, who are that powerful, even the Telosians, are they allowed in the Federation and Starfleet? And what do you do? Talk about a vow. What do you do with someone who can not only read your mind, but make you see illusions?
Right.
So, wait, but what's path in Latin? Because I know television and telephone, and obviously, so what's path? Telepath. If tele is far away, what's path?
Know the answer to that?
Maybe it's thought.
That'd be weird.
I don't know. That's a good question, though.
Okay.
If someone knows the answer to that or wants to look it up for me. I want to know.
That's the note that I didn't look up, and I made a note to do because a path is something you walk on. Tele means far
path. Like what? That's what I thought too.
Pathological, pathogen. Oh crap! And I knew Latin.
Long road.
I don't know, and I meant to look that up too. Shoot.
Well, you've got a couple. I mean, we're at 36 minutes now, 37 minutes, so we need to transition. But
yeah.
So does anybody have any closing thoughts about the telepaths before we turn it over to the conversation about empathological fallacies?
Yeah, we should bring this back as a full hour.
I agree. This is at least an hour discussion.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, if you're listening on the audio podcast, we'll take a quick break and promote a fellow ESO Network podcast show. But don't go away, because when we come back, we'll be talking about the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. So stay right there. And if you're watching with us live, we're just going to continue on. So Veronica, you want to give us a spoiler alert for this week?
Spoilers.
Perfect. And that's spoilers for Star Trek Lower Decks and Pathological Fallacies. Now, are you guys familiar with the term pathological fallacy?
Yeah, sort of.
I looked up the definition because I think it's very fitting for Star Trek in general and for this episode. So a pathological fallacy is an error of overgeneralization where pathological traits seen in one person or in a limited set of people are extrapolated and credited to the basic population, which sums up most Star Trek species. So I thought it was cute.
Yes,
and also them flipping that into empathological fallacies. I thought that was cute. It's a clever title.
It is clever.
And it plays into well of the episode, I think. What do we think this week about empathological fallacies?
Well, as always, I loved it because it's Lower Decks, because it's fun, because it's 25 minutes and it gets to the point and tells a good story. And I thought the Betazed characters were great.
Yeah. What you, Keith?
I enjoyed it too, although I was still a little confused that once their secret was out, they felt they had to take over the ship. I mean, I wasn't quite sure why they had to go that ninja on everybody. Yeah. That was a little weird to me, but I thought it was good. And it was funny, I wasn't enjoying Boimler's story at first. And it was actually one of the times I was thinking, this doesn't need a B plot. I'd just rather they extend the A plot. But at the end, they pulled it together. We'll get to there. But when the alarm went off and Strax and everybody just kind of stood there like that, I just laughed my butt off. When all of a sudden they went from whatever those goofy games were to security, that was so funny. I ended up loving that. They were great. They literally posed before they went, and grabbed their phasers and everything like that. And I thought that was really good.
What did you think, Veronica?
I lost where we were at because I was looking up what path is.
Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yes, but I missed what they had already said.
And just say what you thought.
Well, I really enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun, and we got a lot of T'Lyn, and she's awesome.
T'Lyn is great.
Yes,
she is.
And they're doing for T'Lyn what I'd kind of hope they would do for like Kayshawn, which is developer. This was her POV episode, and I thought it was great. She's just great in I just love everything she says.
Yes.
I think I said that last week. I just laugh at every line.
We need a T'Lyn show.
Right.
Yeah.
I would watch the heck out of that.
I saw a tweet by I was looking up her name and I can't find it. The actress who plays T'Lyn, when she did her audition, she went back and watched a lot of Spock and T'Pol episodes.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
it is.
I think it's Gabrielle Ruiz.
I think
if I'm
so.
Remembering correctly.
Yes.
But don't quote me on that. But I mean, she's great. She's got this great Vulcan delivery, and she's not trying to be Vulcan, but also emotional. She's just going straight Vulcan.
Yeah.
And just deadpan. But it works so well because she's playing off of the Lower Decks crew.
Yes.
And they're so up here all the time, so she can just come down.
Exactly.
The contrast is just funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
because everyone else on the ship is nuts.
Well, it was interesting because when everybody started getting crazy and shouting and stuff, she was kind of like, "Well, you're always like this." at
Yeah.
first.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, to be funny, Lower Decks will bring in wacky things, but I think this
Right.
episode is a great example of just coloring inside the lines. They're just
Mhm.
using things that have already been on Star Trek and just combining them. And it's, things like, a wacky Vulcan sex crazed ambassador is something we've seen a lot on Star Trek, or not Vulcan, but Betazoid.
Betazoid.
Yeah,
Or
Right.
the crew affected by the telepathic, like it's just things that have done before, but just recombining them, and it's just funny.
Hmm.
I think that's great.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree too. I did have one question though about Lynn's affliction, the
Okay. The Bendy syndrome.
Bendy syndrome.
Bendy?
I
Bendai?
thought-
Bendai.
Bendai. I thought with Sarek they equated that to dementia or
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. in
Yes,
older
exactly.
people, and that they said it was unusual she got at that age. But I also thought they implied in TNG that it was basically terminal.
Yeah. It was for Sarek. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what he died from.
Hmm.
So what's going to happen to her? Because I thought, there was no real treatment for it in TNG. Maybe they found the treatment in the last just a couple of years.
Could be.
Yeah.
I mean, or it could be it's not as bad if you get it when you're young.
yeah.
Maybe when you get it when you're 202 years old, it's more serious,
Right.
but you can bounce back at 62.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They sort of hand waved and moved right past that. But yeah, I had the
Right.
same thought. It was
Exactly.
like, didn't that kill Sarek? And it wasn't that like, dementia
Yeah.
for
Does that
Vulcans?
mean that she's living with a terminal disease? And it could be that he had it his whole life, and it only became an issue at that point, like when it sort of took over his mind.
Right.
So it could be something that she just lives with and learns to deal with for most of her life.
I mean, at first she didn't realize that she was causing it.
Yeah.
And she just thought the humans were being, maybe Sarek just went around his whole life thinking humans are irrational a lot.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprising
Maybe-
based on the way
Yeah.
he treats them.
Yeah, maybe he's having
Thank
a
you.
flare up, or the Klingons got violent again, and he was just like, well, Klingons are weird. Didn't
Also-
realize it was because of him.
I also thought it was interesting. We've seen a little bit of this before with other Vulcans, such as Tuvok and T'Pol. T'Lyn is 62 years old,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
is pretty old to be at her rank. She should be a captain, admiral, commodore. But one thing they've established a couple of times in Star Trek is because they live so long, Vulcans sometimes have more than one career. They'll do something and then they'll change. Tuvok left Starfleet for several years and came back. T'Pol, before she was on the starship, she was part of the group of Vulcans who were working with humans, but they changed careers. So maybe T'Lyn came into the Vulcan Defense Forces later in life, which I thought was kind of interesting.
She's about the same age as T'Pol, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Wasn't T'Pol in her
Yeah.
60s?
I think she was
T'Pol was-
65.
Yeah,
T'Pol
that's what I was
same
thinking.
thing.
Whereas Tuvok was, when we knew him on the show, was like around 120.
He was
Yeah.
100, right? He had been
Right.
in Starfleet, then he left, then he came back, and I think T'Pol she'd been doing a lot of diplomatic corps work on Earth, and then she decided to do that. They chose her for the space thing. So it's very interesting if you live that long. Would you do one career or like Vulcans and other races who long live? They do different careers. They become different people.
Yeah.
3 super quick comments. They're very short. Wayne says, putting Veronica on the spot can be most entertaining. Matt wishes that Spock in Strange New Worlds was more like T'Lyn.
Preach.
And Matt also says, I don't know. I think Trek needs more sex-crazed Vulcan ambassadors. It can't
Don't
hurt.
preach.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the opposite of a telepath and heard nothing that anyone was saying.
Or you're a really good one. You know how to block out the thoughts.
Right.
There you go. There you go.
You were exercising that discipline.
Yeah, that's discipline.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You mentioned when they went to Red Alert, everyone into action. I noticed that there was a couple of times in this episode people had really funny runs. Like T'Lyn
Yes.
did the like T1000 run. Whenever time
Yes.
she ran, she had
I
the
didn't
hands
notice
like Robert Patrick.
Yes.
And it was Kayshawn did like, I think it's, what's the cartoon character? Is it Naruto who puts his arms back
Naruto.
and his head
Naruto.
down?
Yeah.
And like the anime guy. And like
Yeah.
run that.
And that's a thing. That's a thing that like the teenagers do,
Right.
especially now. They're
But-
like
that's
putting their arms behind them and run really fast.
That's what Kayshawn did when he went into action. His battle mode was doing that run.
As soon as he did that, I was like, "What are you doing?"
It was funny.
Okay,
It
let
was-
me interject really quickly with the most important comment that we have had so far tonight. Vandy Beth says, "Yay, Alan's back."
Yeah, that
Here I
agree.
am.
I agree.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Vandy Beth. And yay, Vandy Beth is watching.
Yay.
Yay!
She doesn't watch when you're not here.
Well, because she's usually on the show.
I know, I'm just kidding.
So a couple of points. One, I'm absolutely fascinated by this view, this historical view that we got, that centuries ago, the Caitians were hunters and they hunted Betazoids.
Yeah.
I
ate them.
want to know more about that. Now,
Yes.
with 7 years of Troy on the show, I always wanted to know more about Betazed history, and we never really got anything. And that, you know what? That leads me to another point that I'm jumping around now. I am disappointed that none of these diplomats that were on the show this week were daughters of anything or the houses of whatever and the sacred chalice of reeks and all that stuff. Why did they not come up with something for them for that?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think it's really, really, and I don't think we've seen this before. The captain used their telepathy against them. She used it as a weapon against them.
Yeah.
She played a Brer Rabbit there.
She tricked that lady into reading her mind and then planted what she wanted that lady to receive. And that was the other one talking smack about her behind her back.
So
Buddy,
I wonder
that
if
was
someone
smart.
like thinks of something that didn't actually happen, and the telepath reads that.
Well,
maybe like Riker remembers a time when he had a bad hand when he's playing cards with Troy in the hopes that she'll pick up their feelings. I don't know. But yeah, I thought that was really good, and I thought Freeman was good across this. I mean, they're all affected by the thing, but I thought she did a good job of leaping into action when she thought she knew what was going on, and then changing when she.
I am good at my job.
Right.
Yeah.
Which ordinarily that would bother me, but they were under the affliction of that of that virus. Because I would hope that she would usually be good at her job. She's the captain of the starship. But I love the little when the Romulans popped up for a minute, and he was like, they're all disappointed they didn't come into the neutral zone, and he was like, set course for sector 87. We'll lurk over there.
Yeah.
I thought that was
also, did you notice that there were red warning beacons at the neutral zone?
Yeah, I saw that. And I want to know how they have red warning beacons in a three-dimensional
space, exactly.
What?
Yeah, I looked it up. Cool. I was curious because they're flying from Angel 1 to Risa, and then they changed course for Betazed into the neutral zone. Which I was like, how is that possibly on the way to Betazed? Right. So I looked it up in stellar cartography, and it's not.
Of course,
Angel 1 or the Angel system is like up there. Like you would fly past the Romulans, Romulan space, but they must have just been under the influence because they turned the entirely wrong way and went into the neutral zone instead.
They're not going to Betazed.
They were pulling a Commodore Stalker and flying into the neutral zone as a shortcut.
Not a shortcut.
So exactly what was these people, what was their mission? They were basically intelligence, but what was their ultimate mission?
They were going to all these parties, but they were telepathically looking for clues as to what was happening to these ships that were disappearing. So I would expect, because they're ambassadors, they're going to be at the high level parties, and they're just like mentally scanning people, I guess, just looking for clues.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in reality, they are part of the Betazed Intelligence Association, or whatever the A stands for. Agency, that's it.
Probably.
Yes, exactly. And I thought that was interesting, too, because that's the first time we've heard anything about that as well. Yeah. Because we know about the Obsidian Order, and we know about the Tal Shiar, and we know about Section 31, but now we know that the Betazeds have their own.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love this stuff.
Did you see that twist coming?
No.
Me
I didn't.
No.
Yeah. And we were talking about how you would deal with telepaths. You would think that Betazeds who are undercover might have to do something like disguise their eyes, because they all have basically black eyes.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a Betazed spy trying to get loose in, say, Klingon or Romulan space? It ain't happening. I have the feeling they're not going to play around with telepaths in their midst.
It's a pretty good cover, though, if you have people like Luxana Troy out there. Like if you're at a party with Luxana Troy, you're not going to assume she's a spy.
No.
And they're basically playing up that attitude, that the demeanor, the
socialite.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or they're just. I thought it was cute that they were coming from Angel 1.
Me too.
And then heading to Risa, like, they're hitting all the good parties.
Exactly. Matt Sweatman says Betazoids would be very useful in Section 31.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, the 3 Betazoid characters that we had on the show, and I don't know their character names, unfortunately. I forget.
I think I do.
Of the guest cast, and I thought I kind of recognized their voices, but it wasn't until the credits roll at the end. 2 of them stand out to me. One is Wendy Malick, who, of course, is well known for Dream On, Just Shoot Me, Hot in Cleveland, and a few other shows that she was amazing in.
Yeah.
Especially Just Shoot Me. She was just phenomenal in that show. But the other one, the main one, was Rachel Dratch, a Saturday Night Live cast member for many years. So what an excellent casting we got for those 3 characters. And I can't figure out who the other one was, the third one.
I don't know. I didn't look them up, but I think their names were Dolorix, Cathu, and I think it was Timoret was the third one, but don't quote me on that third one. But
That's
I thought
close. I think.
Dolorix I thought was pretty funny. That's
Dolorix
funny
is a
name.
great name.
Yeah.
And I think that one is Rachel Dratch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like when they came on to Ransom and he was into it. And they're like,
Right.
we like it when they play.
Yeah.
So maybe like if Picard and Riker had just been act like they were into it, Loxana Troy would have got it bored and left a long time ago.
Right. There's no conquest there.
Right.
I thought that the jokes that they ran with Dr. Ta'ana about, hey, that was centuries ago that we used to eat you people. And then when she gets all, gobbled up in the head, she's like, oh man, we're going to carve them up like brisket. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I thought this whole episode was fun. What did you think about the twist on the security guys?
Oh, hang
Go
on.
ahead.
Elaine says the third one was voiced by Janelle James. Of course. She plays the principal on Abbott Elementary. Wait, is she the principal or is she the older teacher? Because it sounded more like the older teacher.
She's
No. But no, you're right. Janelle James is the principal.
Yeah,
that's
Shirley
why she
Ralph is
sounded
the,
so
teacher.
familiar. I knew her voice.
Awesome.
Thank you, Elaine. That I feel better now.
Well, what do we think about the more well-rounded security guys? What do we think about their?
I thought that was
and I can't.
so...
I did the word just fell out of my brain. The not wholesome, but
holistic.
Holistic.
Yeah,
I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah.
We're here to keep the ship safe. Sometimes that means fighting enemies. Sometimes that means your mental well-being.
Yeah.
What a fascinating approach to security.
Yeah. It's not in medical. I like that. I think that was a fantastic twist.
Yeah, that's something we've
like
seen
that
on Star
too.
Trek before. Not that I remember.
No, I don't think
No.
so. Otherwise, you got
I
nothing
thought
for
this-
your Troys and your Crushers to do.
Right.
Yeah.
If Worf is doing it.
I thought that was pretty.
Can you imagine Worf doing that? Oh my gosh.
I can't imagine Worf security guys were doing a lot of beat poetry.
No.
He might make a listen to Klingon opera, which he seems to be
Right.
into.
It relaxes Worf.
Yeah, it does.
So he may think that it would be good.
Yeah. Very loud.
I like that they were serving. Was it? Am I right? They were serving root beer floats. Oh no, that was in the short trek.
Yeah, you're thinking of the short trek.
I watched them both at the same time. I'm getting all wacko now.
I thought it was funny when they gave Boimler the choice of the games, and one of them was the puzzle, the Starfleet security, and it was
Yeah.
Malcolm Reed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of their games involved
Yeah.
it was Worf, and then Odo was the
Yeah.
answer in charades, and then Malcolm. $2 didn't get any love, but the others did.
Yeah.
Elaine said,
There's no justice for Tubix.
"No,
For those on the audio podcast, I have a shirt on from the Titmouse company. That's the shirt of the week for Lower Decks, and it says "Justice for Tubix."
Speaking of the week, have y'all played the Lower Decks Wordle?
Mm-mm.
I've never played
I haven't
any
either,
World.
not this week yet. Anyway, Elaine says, as part of Elaine and Matt Watch TV, I watch TV and I know things.
That's true.
So if people should follow them on their television journeys and go find their Elaine and Matt Watch TV Facebook page.
Absolutely.
Well, Elaine, did you hear sadly 2 weeks ago that Abbott Elementary was canceled after 2 seasons?
What? What? Are you No, that
Oh,
cannot
no.
be right.
Sorry, wrong one. Not now I'm doing it. Not Abbott Elementary. The Wonder Years. I'm thinking of completely different actors.
Oh, that's a whole different thing.
What the? I'm about to jump through this screen. Swear to God.
Look,
Because I mean, it
look,
won more awards and
Yeah,
oh,
good
it's
night.
incredible. Oh my
if
God.
anybody else had mistaken 2 black shows like that, I'd be all up in there raising my fist, burning this place down. So that's my bad.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, do we have any closing thoughts about this one before we wrap it up?
So I had 2 things that I saw that I wanted to mention. I really liked the Betazoids little lipstick weapon things. I thought that was
great.
And
That was great.
I was trying to look at some of the background aliens. There's one of the bartenders with purple hair. I couldn't tell what that alien is. So if someone knows what that
either.
alien is, let me know. And also, there was a Starfleet officer walking around with a hijab. So I thought that was pretty
Yes.
cool. And I hadn't noticed that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
This is the first episode I noticed that in.
She's been
we've
at
seen-
least one other app.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've seen her a couple of times, maybe only 2 times before prior to this. But yeah, I loved that. I loved seeing that.
Yeah.
Did you also notice that when people were getting crazy, one of the guys was walking around with the game on his forehead?
No, I did not see that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's
And then there was
So
a
awesome.
couple of Anbo Jitsu dudes in the
Yeah,
corridor.
Oh yeah, I did see those. Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
My final thought about what you guys were saying too was I thought the B plot at first I didn't like it, but I loved the way they brought that home, where
Yeah.
the holistic approach, where it's not just fighting, as he was saying, kicking ass. It's about the whole person, and I thought that worked really well. And then when the alarm went off and they literally did that tableau where they froze like a comic book, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very good writing.
Yes.
You know, I've seen that a couple of times before where you think a B plot is unnecessary and it isn't going anywhere, and then
Yeah.
they do something to land it. Like,
Absolutely.
I should not have ever doubted them.
Yeah.
Right.
Brought it home.
Speaking of the background aliens, what's up with the Merps?
Oh,
When he was trying to memorize their names, and there's like Big
And I
Merp
saw
and Sleepy
them.
Merp.
I saw them. I saw at least 2 of them in the background. I saw Big
Yeah.
Merp and Sleepy Merp.
Well, they've been around for a while, but is that their species? Is that how they're named,
It
or is
must
it
be.
nicknames?
Must be.
I wonder. That was great.
Yeah. But one of them is just Merps. I don't know. Are they all called Merp from this planet, so they come up with nicknames?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
It's like that dude from Star Trek 3, the sleepy Klingon.
But I like that Boimler, even though he's comedic relief, I like that he's being allowed to grow because he's trying so hard. He's taking his job really seriously.
Oh, yeah.
And even though it was funny, he wasn't really the butt of a joke here.
Yeah.
I also like that even though Mariner is also still funny, we've talked about this many times, she's different than she was in the first season. She, she's there, she's responsible, she's doing the stuff she needs to do. She's cracking jokes while she's doing it.
Yeah.
But, she's a member of the crew for sure.
Yeah.
God, I love her so much.
Yeah, she's great.
Absolutely. All right, Alan, where can people find more of you?
Okay, head right on over to www.cosmiccreative.com, and you can find a list of my books and my podcast, which includes Modern Musicology, weekly podcast about all sorts of music topics.
And how about you, Keith?
You can find me on Instagram and X and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
FeltNerdy.com.
Yep. And if you're in the Atlanta area, they've just announced the date for the Halloween Puck and Puppet show, which is going to be at the Center for Puppetry Arts for the first time in whatever 15 or 20 years they've been doing the Puck and Puppet show. So we're going to have the chance to perform on the main stage at the Center for Puppetry Arts for the first time.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, that's October 14th. So come out. It's a competitive puppet slam. So you also have the chance to vote for us, and maybe we can win some money.
Win money.
Yeah.
Right
but,
on.
Come and vote for us.
But even if not, it's just a fun show. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah.
So if you're in the Atlanta area, come over to the Center for Puppetry Arts October 14th, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
Yes. Hold on.
Ooh.
Hold on. I made a note.
Ooh.
And by note, I mean I texted it to Chuck so I would have it. This crew is always weird and yelling.
Perfect.
Right on.
You
That
delivered
about
it
sums
so
us
well.
up, I gotta say. All right. Good night,
right.
everybody. See you
Bye,
next
everybody.
Thursday.
Thanks for participating. See you guys.